My wife had not been gone 48 hours when I heard the knock at my front door. I remember the exact sound of it, not soft, not hesitant, not the knock of someone who had come to grieve. It was a purposeful knock, the kind that means business. I opened the door and there stood Renata, my daughter-in-law, dressed in dark clothes with a manila folder pressed flat against her chest and a small, tight smile on her face. She said she was there to help me get through some important paperwork. She said it gently, like she was doing me a favor. But I had lived 61 years on this earth, and I had learned that when someone shows up to your door the day after you bury your wife with a folder and a smile, they are not there to help you. They are there to collect. Before I tell you what was in that folder, I want to ask you something. If someone you trusted for years showed up at your lowest moment, not to hold your hand but to hand you a pen, what would you do? Would you sign just to make the pain stop? Would you call their bluff? Would you stay quiet and gather your thoughts? Drop your answer in the comments right now, because where Marcus Reid goes from here is the kind of story that will make you question everything you thought you knew about family. My name is Marcus Reid, and I am going to tell you a story that I have kept mostly inside for a long time, not because I was ashamed, not because I did not know what happened, but because when something cuts this deep, you need time before you can hold it up to the light without flinching. I think I am ready now, and I think someone out there needs to hear this. My wife Gloria died on a Tuesday morning in October. She had been fighting kidney disease for 3 years. We knew it was coming, the way you always know but never fully believe. She was 60 years old. She was the kind of woman who kept fresh flowers on the kitchen table even in the middle of winter, who remembered every single person's birthday in our family and sent actual handwritten cards, who could make a room feel warmer just by walking into it. She was also the woman who helped me build everything we had. Every dollar we saved, every piece of property we owned, every decision that mattered, she was right there beside me. We were a team, 40 years of real partnership. Our son Darnell was 41 years old at the time of his mother's passing. He lived about an hour away in a newer suburb with his wife Renata and their 2 kids. I had always been cordial with Renata. She was sharp, organized, socially polished. She came from a family that prioritized appearance and financial positioning, and she had brought that energy into her marriage with Darnell. I never disliked her outright, but I had noticed things over the years, small things. The way she would steer conversations about money toward her own family's interests. The way she sometimes spoke over Gloria at family dinners. The way she would look at our house, at the land we owned, at the business I had run for 22 years, with an expression I could only describe as calculating. But I loved my son, and my son loved his wife, so I kept those observations in a quiet room inside my mind and I left the door mostly closed. Gloria's final months were hard. I was with her every day. I handled her medications, drove her to every appointment, sat beside her hospital bed through every procedure. Darnell visited when he could, which was not often. Renata visited less. There were reasons offered each time. The kids had activities, work was busy, the drive was long. I never made a scene about it because Gloria did not want conflict near her. She wanted peace in her final season, and I was going to give her that. What I did not know during those months was that Renata had been doing research. Not medical research, not research on kidney disease or palliative care or how to support a family member through grief. She had been researching our assets. The house we owned free and clear, valued at just over $400,000 in that market. The 3 rental properties on the east side of town that Gloria and I had purchased across 20 years of careful savings. The small commercial property where my machine shop had operated for over 2 decades. The land behind our main house, which had quietly tripled in value after a development company moved into the county. And the life insurance policy that Gloria and I had held together since the early years of our marriage. I did not know any of this at the time. I found out later, but I am getting ahead of myself. The funeral was on a Friday. We held it at the church where Gloria and I had been married. The same pastor, same pews, same smell of old wood and candle wax. There were over 200 people there. People from the neighborhood, from her book club, from the shop, from our old block. People I had not seen in years who drove hours just to say goodbye to Gloria Reid. I sat in the front row and I felt something I still cannot fully name. It was not just sadness. It was the specific feeling of a world becoming smaller. Gloria had been the warmth in every room for 40 years, and now I was sitting in a church full of people who felt it too. Darnell sat beside me. He cried. I believe that was real. Whatever else I will say about this story, I believe my son's grief was real that day. Renata sat on his other side. She was composed, appropriately dressed. She shook hands and accepted condolences with a practiced grace that I noticed but said nothing about. It was a funeral. People grieve in different ways. The knock came Saturday morning. I had barely slept. I was sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee that had gone cold when I heard it. I walked to the door in the same clothes I had worn to bed, which were not really pajamas but a soft shirt and old slacks, the kind of outfit you end up in when you stop caring about small things. I opened the door and there was Renata. Alone. No Darnell, no children. She was wearing a dark blazer over a blouse and she had the folder in her hands. She said good morning. She said she was so sorry again about Gloria. She asked if she could come in. I stepped aside and let her in because she was my son's wife and because I did not yet fully understand what was happening. She sat across from me at the same kitchen table where Gloria and I had eaten breakfast together for 31 years. She opened the folder on the table and turned it toward me. Inside was a document, several pages densely written with places flagged in yellow for a signature. She began to explain it in a careful, practiced voice. She said that she and Darnell had been worried about me. She said that managing all these properties alone at my age could become overwhelming. She said they wanted to help me by taking on co-ownership of the properties so that they could handle the management burden. She framed it as protection. She said the transfer would simplify my taxes, protect the estate from legal complications, and ensure everything stayed in the family. She put a pen on top of the document. I looked at the pens, then I looked at her, then I looked at the folder. I said slowly and clearly that I would need to have my lawyer look at anything before I signed it. Her smile did not disappear, but it changed, just slightly, a tightening at the corners. She said that was perfectly fine, of course, and she left the folder on the table. She told me not to worry. She told me this was simply about protecting our family's future. After she left, I sat at that table for a long time. I thought about the fact that Darnell had not come with her. I thought about the fact that she had driven an hour each way to bring paperwork on the day after my wife's funeral, which she had not bothered to do during 3 years of illness and caregiving. I thought about the folder. I thought about the smile. And then I picked up my phone and called my lawyer. His name was Bernard Acaffer, and he had handled my business affairs for 17 years. I told him I needed to see him Monday morning. I need to back up here and explain something about my financial situation because it matters to understanding what Renata had actually put in that folder. Gloria and I had not been wealthy in any flashy sense. We lived modestly. We drove practical cars. We did not take expensive vacations or carry impressive credit card statements. But we had been disciplined in a quiet, consistent way that accumulated over decades. I had started the machine shop in my late 30s with a small business loan and every dollar I had saved over 10 years of working for someone else. Gloria had worked as a school administrator for 22 years before she moved to part-time during her illness. We had paid off our home by the time I was 50. We had bought the first rental property when our son was in middle school, treating it as a savings account you could walk through, then a second, then a third. The commercial space came later, after the shop outgrew its original lease. What we had built was not glamorous, it was just real. It was the result of 40 years of choosing discipline over comfort, of saying no to things we could have had so that we could say yes to things that would last. Gloria was the one who kept the files organized, the one who tracked every lease payment, every repair bill, every tax record. She had a filing cabinet in our home office that was organized so precisely you could find anything in it within 30 seconds. Renata had seen that filing cabinet. She had been in that office. She had seen the property addresses, the ownership documents, the insurance papers. What I did not realize until Bernard explained it to me on Monday morning was how far Renata had taken her research. Bernard looked at the document in the folder for about 20 minutes. Then he looked at me over his reading glass. Says and said this was not a co-ownership proposal. This was a deed transfer document for all 4 properties, combined with a limited power of attorney that would give Darnell and Renata authority over my financial decisions. The language had been written by someone who knew what they were doing. It was buried under friendly framing, but the substance was clear. If I had signed that document while I was exhausted and grieving and trusting my son's household, I would have handed over approximately $2 million in real estate and surrendered my own financial independence, all on the second day of my widowhood. Bernard set the papers down on his desk and folded his hands. He said, "Marcus, whoever wrote this was counting on you not reading it carefully." I sat with that for a moment. Then I asked Bernard how long it would take to make sure everything I owned was legally bulletproof. He said he had already been thinking about that and that we should start immediately. I want to tell you about the next few days because they matter. I did not call Darnell right away. I needed to understand what I was actually dealing with before I said anything. Was Darnell behind this? Was he a willing participant or had Renata moved on her own? I did not know and I could not afford to tip my hand before I knew, so I stayed quiet. I went through Gloria's filing cabinet and made copies of everything. Property deeds, insurance documents, business records, the lease agreements, the land appraisal that had come in 8 months earlier when the development company had approached us. That appraisal, which I had not yet responded to, valued the land behind our house at $340,000 on its own. I brought all of it to Bernard. We spent 4 hours at his office on Tuesday. By the end of that meeting, I had begun a legal process to ensure that every asset I owned was correctly titled, that my will was updated and specific, and that a trust structure was in place that would make any unauthorized transfer legally impossible. Bernard also told me something that disturbed me. He said the deed transfer document Renata had brought me had been prepared by an attorney. He could tell from the formatting and language. This was not something Renata had typed up at home. She had paid a lawyer to prepare documents to present to me at my wife's funeral. I drove home that Tuesday evening and I sat in the driveway for a while. I did not feel explosive anger. I felt something colder and steadier. Something that happens when you realize the people who were supposed to be family had been watching you, calculating you, measuring what you had and planning how to access it. And the only reason they had not taken it was because I had said I needed my lawyer first. I thought about what Gloria would have said. Gloria always said, Marcus, you are too willing to assume the best about people. She said it with love, not criticism. She said it because she knew me. I had been doing that for years with Renata, noticing things and closing the door on them, giving benefit of the doubt that had not been earned. Not anymore. Darnell called me on Wednesday evening. He asked how I was doing, normal conversation, surface level. He asked if Renata had stopped by. I said yes. He asked if I had looked at the paperwork. I said I had passed it to my lawyer. There was a pause, a specific kind of pause that tells you more than words. Then he said, okay, no rush, we just wanted to help. I said I appreciated that. We hung up. He called back 40 minutes later. This time the tone was slightly different. He said he wanted to make sure I understood the purpose of the documents. He said it was really just to protect me. He said managing properties alone after mom was going to be hard and he did not want me to be overwhelmed. His voice had the careful quality of something rehearsed. I listened to every word. Then I said, Darnell, I have been managing these properties for 20 years. Your mother just passed 5 days ago. I am not signing anything right now. He said he understood. We ended the call. I knew then that Darnell had been in it, maybe not the architect of it. Maybe Renata had planned the specifics and brought him along through persuasion and pressure and the kind of logic that sounds reasonable inside a marriage. But he knew about the documents. He had been waiting to hear whether I had signed them. I stayed focused on what was in front of me, not on confrontation, not on punishment, on protection. Over the next 2 weeks, Bernard completed the trust structure. My 4 properties were now held in a trust that I had established, with clear terms and with a local property management company assigned to handle day-to-day operations. The business, which I had been preparing to sell for a year, was now in formal negotiation with a buyer Bernard had connected me with. The life insurance policy, which Darnell had apparently expected would be partly accessible to him through Renata's power of attorney scheme, had a sole beneficiary named in Gloria's and my original documentation. Me. And now, through the trust update, it was designated specifically to fund a scholarship at the school where Gloria had worked for 22 years. That had been Gloria's dream. She had mentioned it once quietly in the hospital. I had written it down. I also did something else during those 2 weeks. I wrote things down, everything I could remember about the sequence of events. The knock on the door, the folder, the smile, the document, Bernard's explanation, Darnell's phone calls. I kept a simple notebook, not for dramatic purposes. Because if anyone ever challenged my decisions or tried to claim I was mentally unfit or grieving impaired or manipulated by my own lawyer, I would have a clear, dated record of exactly what happened and exactly what I had decided and why. The first moment of real confrontation came 3 weeks after Gloria's funeral. Darnell and Renata came over for what they called a family dinner. They brought the kids, which I think was intentional. Children soften the edges of hard conversations. I cooked, I set the table, I was calm and normal and completely present. Renata was charming throughout dinner. She asked about the shop, she praised the food, she helped clear the plates, she was performing. I watched it and said nothing. After dinner, when the kids had gone to watch television in the other room, Darnell brought up the paperwork again. He said he was not trying to pressure me but that some of the property leases were coming up for renewal and it might help to have him involved in the decisions. He laid it out reasonably. He made it sound like a son being responsible. Renata added a few careful words about property management being complex and how they had done a lot of research on real estate management. I let them finish. Then I told them that I had worked with Bernard to set up a property trust and that everything was being managed professionally. I told them I had also retained a property management company. I told them the business sale was in progress. I said all of this in the same calm voice I would use to describe the weather. Renata's expression shifted, not dramatically, but I saw it. A flicker of something that was not grief and was not concern. It was the look of someone whose plan has just run into a wall. Darnell said he wished I had talked to him before making those decisions. I said I had talked to my lawyer, which was the appropriate person to talk to about legal and financial matters. He said he was family. I said I knew that. The dinner ended politely, but something had changed in the room and all 3 of us could feel it. Over the next month, the pressure came in waves. Darnell called more frequently than he had during the entire 3 years of Gloria's illness. Each call had some element of financial conversation in it. Was I sure about the management company? Had I looked at the terms of the trust carefully? Did Bernard really have my best interests at heart? He once casually mentioned that he had spoken to another attorney who felt my trust structure might have some tax implications. I asked for the attorney's name. Darnell could not provide it. Renata began posting on social media about family and legacy. Long, emotional posts about how important it was to protect what your parents built, about how children had a duty to steward their family's wealth, about how she and Darnell were committed to making sure their family's future was secure. People commented with heart emojis and agreement. Nobody outside our house knew what those posts were really about. I watched all of it. I saved screenshots, not because I was building a legal case, because I was watching a pattern and patterns matter. The next significant moment came from an unexpected direction. One of the tenants in my rental properties, a woman named Mrs. Colette Jarvis, called me one afternoon to ask about her lease renewal. She had been a tenant of mine for 11 years. She paid on time every single month and kept the property in excellent condition. She was the kind of tenant you're grateful for. During our conversation, she mentioned something that stopped me cold. She said she had received a phone call 2 weeks earlier from a man who identified himself as Darnell Reid, who told her that I was in the process of transferring the properties to family management, and that she should expect new lease paperwork coming from a different address. I asked her to repeat that. She did. My son had called my tenant and told her the properties were being transferred before I had agreed to anything, before I had signed anything. He had done it as if the transfer was already settled, as if the document Renata brought to my door the day after the funeral had already been signed. I asked Mrs. Jarvis if she still had the phone number. She did. Wrote it down. I called Bernard. He told me this was serious and that it could constitute interference with existing lease agreements. He drafted a brief letter to be sent on my behalf to all 4 tenants confirming that I was the sole owner and manager of the properties, that all lease renewals would come directly from the property management company I had retained, and that any communications from third parties claiming authority over these properties should be reported to him immediately. I received responses from all 4 tenants within a week. 2 of them mentioned they had received similar calls. One had even been told that the properties were being absorbed into a family LLC and that the management company was already arranged. That call had come from a number registered to Renata. They had been doing this while I was grieving, while I was making funeral arrangements and accepting condolences and trying to figure out how to sleep in a bed that suddenly felt twice as large. They had been calling my tenants and positioning themselves as the incoming management, banking on the assumption that I would sign the document and the reality would catch up to the story they were already telling. I sat in my car in the parking lot of Bernard's office after he showed me all of this, and I thought about Darnell as a boy. I thought about the birthdays and the school projects and the Saturday mornings. I thought about all the times Gloria and I had sacrificed, quietly and without announcement, so that Darnell could have what he needed. I thought about the 3 years she spent fighting an illness while he visited when he could, which was not often. I thought about the folder and the smile and the knock on the door. I did not cry. I had already done that. What I felt now was something quieter and more permanent. The feeling of a door closing, not in anger, in understanding. Bernard filed a formal notice with the county recorder's office noting the unauthorized representation of property ownership by third parties. He also sent a cease and desist letter to Darnell and Renata by certified mail, which they signed for on a Thursday afternoon. I know they signed for it because Bernard confirmed it. I can only imagine what that felt like to open. I did not hear from Darnell for 2 weeks after that letter arrived. When he finally called, his voice was different. The practiced reasonableness was gone. He was upset, genuinely upset, and he wanted to know why I had done this. He said I was treating them like criminals. He said they had only been trying to help. He said this was not what Mom would have wanted. I let him finish. Then I said, Darnell, your mother would not have wanted you calling her tenants and claiming ownership of properties you do not own. She would not have wanted a deed transfer document presented to me the morning after her funeral. She would not have wanted any of this. And neither do I. He did not respond for a long moment. Then he said he had not known about the tenant calls. That was Renata, he said. He did not know she had done that. I said nothing because I knew that was not the whole truth. A man who calls a tenant to tell her the properties are being transferred knows more than he is admitting. He may not have made every call, but he knew the plan. What followed after that phone call was a period of quiet. Not peace, quiet. The difference is significant. Peace is the feeling that comes when something is genuinely resolved. Quiet is the absence of noise while something unfinished sits in the corner of the room. During that quiet, I made a decision. I was going to finish the business sale. I was going to get the full value of what Gloria and I had built, and I was going to be very clear about what came next for the properties, the land, and the scholarship. The business sale closed 4 months after Gloria's funeral. The buyer was a regional manufacturing group that had been scouting in our area for 2 years. Bernard had connected me with them well before Gloria died, and the process had been moving slowly at my own pace. I sold the shop for significantly more than I had originally expected because the development activity in our county had raised commercial property values across the board. The final number, after Bernard's fees and applicable taxes, left me with a substantial sum that I immediately moved into the trust. I was not a billionaire. I want to be clear about that because I think these stories sometimes drift toward unrealistic fantasy, and I want to stay grounded in the truth of what actually happened. But I was financially secure in a way that meant I would never need to ask Darnell or Renata or anyone else for anything. I was 61 years old, my health was good, I had a paid home, a land parcel worth a significant amount, 3 rental properties generating income, and now the proceeds of the business sale sitting in a properly structured trust. Renata had tried to walk through the door the day after my wife's funeral and take all of that, and she had failed because I had said 3 words: I need my lawyer. About 6 months after Gloria's death, there was a family gathering at Darnell's house. His younger sister, my daughter Petra, had flown in from out of state. Petra and I were close. She had been devastated by her mother's death, and we had spoken many times over the phone in the months after the funeral. I had told Petra some of what happened, not everything, but enough. She had listened without interrupting, which told me she was not entirely surprised. The gathering was meant to be low-key. Petra's kids running around the backyard, some food, some coffee. I went because I wanted to see Petra and because I was not going to let discomfort keep me from my own family. Renata was gracious at the gathering. She was the perfect hostess. She smiled and poured drinks and told a long story about a home renovation project. Darnell was quieter than usual. He and I spoke briefly in the kitchen while he was washing dishes. He said he was sorry things had gotten complicated. He said he had not meant for it to go the way it did. I said I accepted that. I said I loved him and that was not going to change. But I also said that I needed him to understand that certain things were settled and would not be revisited. He nodded. He did not look entirely comfortable with it, but he nodded. Petra cornered me in the back corner of the yard near the fence while the kids played. She told me she had known for years that Renata had her eye on what our parents had built. She told me about conversations she had witnessed, questions Renata had asked about our parents' finances at family dinners, comments Renata had made once when she thought Petra was not listening. Petra said she had never known how to raise it without creating a family catastrophe. I told her she had not done anything wrong. I told her that the catastrophe had arranged itself. We stood by that fence for a long time in the afternoon light. She said she missed Mom. I said I did too. I said I missed her every single day and that probably was not going to stop. The turning point that most people outside the family never saw came about 9 months after Gloria's funeral. The development company that had been circling our county finally made a formal offer on the land behind our house. This was the parcel that had been assessed at $340,000 8 months before Gloria died. The formal offer, presented through a real estate attorney, was for $480,000. The development company wanted to break ground on a mixed-use residential and retail project, and the parcel was central to their plan. Bernard reviewed the offer and advised me to negotiate. We countered. They came back. We went back and forth 3 times over 6 weeks. The final agreed price was $522,000. I signed the papers in Bernard's office on a Tuesday afternoon. I called Petra afterward. She cried a little. I did not cry, but I felt something that was close to it, not because of the money, because the land had been part of our life for so long. Gloria used to walk through that field in the evenings in better years. She knew every tree along the back edge. Selling it felt like releasing something, but I knew it was right. I knew it was what she would have wanted me to do rather than hold on to land out of sentiment, while someone else tried to chip away at everything around it. I did not tell Darnell and Renata about the sale until after it was finalized. I was not legally required to tell them anything. The land was mine, the trust was mine, my decisions were mine. When they found out through county records, which are public, Renata called me. For the first time since the cease and desist letter, she called me directly. Her voice was controlled, but the control was doing a lot of work. She said she wished I had included them in the conversation. She said family decisions should involve the whole family. She said she and Darnell had ideas about that land. I said, Renata, that land was purchased by Gloria and me in 1999. It was not a family decision in the way you mean. It was mine to decide. She said she thought we had moved past everything that happened and were working toward a better relationship. I said I was open to a better relationship. But a better relationship did not mean surrendering the right to make my own legal and financial decisions. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said she felt like I had never given her a fair chance. I thought about that. I thought about the knock on the door, the folder, the document prepared by a lawyer, the calls to my tenants, the social media posts about family legacy and protecting wealth, the certified letter, the month of phone calls from Darnell full of careful pressure. I thought about all of it. Then I said, Renata, I gave you a very fair chance for many years. What I will not give you is authority over what Gloria and I built together. She did not respond to that. A few seconds passed and she said goodbye and ended the call. I set my phone down on the kitchen table, the same chairs, the same window with the view of the backyard where the land used to begin and now just ended at the fence. I made myself a cup of coffee. I sat down. I thought about Gloria, not in grief exactly, more like in recognition. She had been right about everything. She had always been right. I had just been too slow to see it clearly. I want to tell you what I did with the money from the land sale because it matters and because it says something about what this whole thing was actually about. The scholarship fund at Gloria's school was already established. I had seeded it with a portion of the life insurance proceeds, as I mentioned. After the land sale, I made a second and larger contribution to the fund, enough to endow it permanently. The school named it the Gloria Me Reid Scholarship for Educational Leadership. There is a small plaque in the main hallway. I went to the ceremony when they unveiled it. I sat in the same kind of chair I had sat in at her funeral. The same pastor was not there, but the feeling was similar. That specific, quiet, undeniable weight of something real being recognized. I cried at the ceremony. I am not embarrassed about that. Darnell did not come to the ceremony. I had not exactly invited him, but the school had sent general announcements and the local newspaper ran a small piece about the fund. Whether he saw it or not, I do not know. I did not ask. Petra came. She sat beside me in the front row. She held my hand during the remarks. Afterward, she said Mom would have loved this. I said I knew. The land sale and the scholarship ceremony were, in a way, the emotional closing of the chapter that had opened with that knock on my door. Not that the relationship with Darnell and Renata had been fully resolved. Relationships like that do not resolve cleanly. They settle into new shapes that are different from what they were before. We see each other at holidays. There is politeness. There is the performance of normalcy that families adopt when something is broken and healed imperfectly. I do not carry bitterness toward Darnell. I carry a clear-eyed understanding of who he is and what he is capable of. I love him the way you can love someone when you have removed the parts of your love that required them to be different from who they are. With Renata, I am simply honest in the most direct way available. I do not fight her. I do not perform warmth I do not feel. I am courteous. I say please and thank you and I ask about the grandchildren because the grandchildren are entirely separate from all of this and they deserve a grandfather who shows up without a cloud over him. She knows what I know what she tried to do. That knowledge sits between us at every family gathering like a quiet third presence. We both acknowledge it by never mentioning it. That is the piece available to us and I have accepted it. What I want to talk about for the last section of this story is what I learned. Not the practical things, though those matter too. Not the legal steps, though those were essential. The deeper thing. The thing that took me longer to name than I expected. For most of my adult life, I was the dependable one. In my family, in my marriage, in my business, among friends. I was the person people called when something needed to be handled. I took pride in that. I think I confused being needed with being valued. I think I spent decades quietly equating the two without examining whether they were actually the same thing. Being needed means someone will call you. It means someone will come to your door. It means someone will reach out when there is something they want from you. It does not mean they see your worth as something separate from your usefulness. Renata needed me to sign that document. She showed up for that. She had not shown up when Gloria needed help getting to appointments. She had not shown up to sit in the hospital. She had not shown up in the small daily ways that actually constitute being family. The people who are truly in your corner show up before you have anything to give them. They show up when showing up costs them something. That distinction changed how I see people now, not in a suspicious way, not in the way that makes you close off from everyone and assume the worst, in a clarifying way. I ask now quietly and honestly whether the people in my orbit show up when it costs them something, whether they give without calculating, whether their presence is consistent or whether it appears and disappears based on what is available. I also learned something about grief that surprised me. Grief is a state of vulnerability that other people can read. Some people see that vulnerability and they move toward you with genuine care. Others see it as an opening. I am not angry at the fact that some people are the second type. I am simply no longer surprised by it, and I am no longer willing to mistake access to me during grief for evidence of love. There is one more thing I want to say before I close this story. About 14 months after Gloria died, I was cleaning out the home office, the filing cabinet, her files. I had been postponing it because going through her organization felt like dismantling something sacred. Each folder was in her handwriting. Each tab was labeled with her neat, careful letters: property, insurance, medical, business, kids. The kids folder had things in it I had forgot. Report cards. A letter Darnell had written to us when he was 17 about wanting to study engineering. A drawing Petra had made when she was 6. A folded note in Gloria's handwriting that I did not recognize. I unfolded it. It was dated about a year before she died, from a period when she was still well enough to move around the house normally. It said this: Marcus, I know you always look for the best in people. That is one of the things I have loved most about you. But I want you to remember that your kindness is not the same as unlimited access. You do not owe anyone the farm because they are family. Family is earned every day by showing up. Do not let anyone take what we built because they knew the right words to say. You will know what to do. I trust you completely. I do not know exactly when she wrote that or precisely what prompted her to write it. Maybe she had seen something. Maybe she had sensed something in Renata that her own generous instincts would not let her name out loud, but that she wanted to leave me some signal about. Maybe it was just wisdom she wanted to pass along. I do not know. What I know is that I found it 14 months after she died, after everything had already happened, and it read like she had known. It read like she had left me exactly the message I needed, timed by the universe or by her own quiet foresight or by some combination of the two that I am not equipped to fully explain. I folded the note back up carefully. I put it in my own wallet behind my ID where I can feel it whenever I reach for something. I have carried it with me since that afternoon. I am 62 years old now. I live in the same house where Gloria and I raised our children. I have the same kitchen table, the same window, the same view of the yard. The land behind the fence belongs to someone else now, and I can see the early foundations of a building going up back there on clear mornings. It does not hurt me the way I thought it would. It feels like something that happened correctly, like I made the right call at the right time for the right reasons. The rental properties are managed professionally and running well. The scholarship is funded and active. The first recipient was a young woman from the east side of the district who wanted to be a teacher. The school sent me a photo of her at the ceremony. I put it on the refrigerator. I talked to Darnell, not as often as before and not the way it was before, but I talk to him. I see the grandchildren when they visit. They are good kids. They deserve to know their grandfather without absorbing the complicated weight of what their parents did. I try to keep it that way. I tell this story not to settle a score. The score has been settled in the only way that matters. I tell it because I know there are other people out there sitting at a kitchen table with a folder in front of them and someone across from them wearing a careful smile, and they are trying to figure out whether to trust their gut. I want those people to hear this. Trust your gut, call your lawyer, read everything, take your time. Grief does not obligate you to sign anything. Love does not mean unlimited access. Being family does not mean being owed. And if someone who never showed up during the hard years suddenly appears with paperwork the day after you bury the most important person in your life, that folder is not about helping you. It is about them. You already know what to do, you just need to trust yourself enough to do it. Marcus Reid found that note at the back of a filing cabinet, and it changed something in him permanently. Gloria had seen it coming, she trusted him to handle it, and he did. Before this video ends, I want to ask you one thing. Think about the people in your life right now who only show up when there is something to gain. Think about the ones who disappeared when things were hard and reappeared when things looked valuable. You do not have to announce anything. You do not have to create a conflict. But you owe it to yourself to see the difference between people who are in your corner and people who are in your orbit for other reasons. If this story hit you somewhere deep, leave a comment below and tell me what you would have do. Knee with that folder. And if you know someone who needs to hear Marcus Reid's story right now, share this video with them. It might be exactly what they need.